I was almost going to say these were going to be wasted. This is my Project 2025. It's taken 2 books to bind these 922 pages. But rumors of Project 2025's demise have been greatly exaggerated. Paul Dans, the director of Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation's right-wing handbook for the next conservative presidency, did announce that he's leaving his post last week. But he left Project 2025 with the intention to focus on getting Donald Trump back in the White House. It's all just one revolving door. We don't know exactly what that means. He says he wants to, quote, direct all my efforts toward winning bigly. He said that. Yes, Donald Trump has recently attempted to distance himself from Project 2025, saying he knows nothing about the handbook crafted by at least 140 former Trump officials. But Trump is not actually distancing himself from the policies of 2025. Look at something called Agenda 47. The name alone draws similarities to Project 2025. Agenda 47, because Donald Trump, if elected, would be the 47th president, is a series of proposals for Trump's campaign issued on its own website. Spoiler alert, it's got massive overlap with Project 2025. Both Project 2025 and Agenda 47 call for the federal government to abolish climate regulations for the fossil fuel industry, remove civil servants from their roles in exchange for political appointees, prioritize the Department of Justice or politicize the Department of Justice by investigating and charging local DAs for prosecutorial decisions, and even deploying the U.S. military on Mexico's side of the border to fight cartels. Generally speaking, you can't put your military in someone else's country without their permission. Donald Trump is distancing himself from Project 2025 in name only. He's not running from the policies in this playbook. He's running from the political consequences of it, from the political consequences of pushing widely unpopular, decidedly autocratic policies. It's a deliberate tactic. As Rolling Stone puts it, quote, this is yet another example of Trump getting exactly what he wanted and what he promised to deliver in his first term, and then being annoyed that those actions are coming back to haunt him at a consequential time. Joining me now is Professor Timothy Snyder. He's a professor of history and global affairs at Yale University. He's the author on the upcoming book on freedom, out in September. Of course, he's had his book out on tyranny and other important books. Professor, good to see you again. Thank you for being with us. This is a tricky one because they actually went and wrote down everything they were going to do. And then Donald Trump goes out to these rallies and tells people, I'm not involved in this. I don't agree with a lot of this stuff. It's got nothing to do with me, which is actually part of what authoritarians sometimes do.
Well, he's trusting that his people will believe him no matter what he says. And that is part of an authoritarian dynamic where you can lie to your own people and then you can say something completely different the next time and they nod their heads and say, oh, yes, I knew it all along. That's part of what it means to belong to that sort of thing. But I mean, as you've already said, the shift is basically a scam. He doesn't have another transition team besides the people who were involved in writing Project 2025. And he doesn't have another transition plan besides what's written down in Agenda 47 and Project 2025. That is it. That is the thing. There is no other thing. He can try to relabel it. But as you say, what it stands for is quite clear. You're going to wreck the federal government, replace anybody who has any sense of responsibility with political appointees, allow what they call the administrative state to cease to exist, which means the federal government can't do anything for anybody. That means children don't get food assistance. It means Medicare deteriorates. It means pretty much everything the federal government does that people are used to no longer works.
I want to ask you about 2 conceptual ideas that Project 2025 puts forth. One is, as you said, dismantling the administrative state. Now, in any functioning democracy, we understand that there are political appointees at the head, the ministers or the secretaries of state, under whom there are experts, career civil servants who know things about things. Project 2025 and a lot of conservative theology here in the United States wishes to dismantle that. And then this concept, which, again, you've studied in other countries, where you install loyalists, not experts. The 2 things come together, replacing the civil service and making sure loyalty over expertise prevails, is a real step toward getting everything you want if you're the president.
Those are steps towards having a cult of the leader. You tell people the government doesn't do anything for them. That's step one. Then you make the government not do anything for them, creating chaos. That's step two. And then step three, you say, as Trump says all the time, I alone can solve it. And in the mess that you're creating and in the mess that you'll continue to create, that will have some kind of plausibility, because appealing to his clients, trying to make some kind of personal connection to the oligarchs under a second Trump administration will be the only way to get anything done. So yeah, you're right. It all hangs together. Making the government cease to work is part of creating a sort of a cult around a leader who is meant to be the only person who can get anything done.
You are so specific in the ways in which you feel that individuals can take power in this election. Certainly, you can either, voting is the least of it, but all the things you can do. How does the existence of Project 2025, which, by the way, is getting, people are spreading news about this all over the place. There's lots of people talking about this, and it's making people, very worried about the next Trump administration. How does the existence of such a specific authoritarian roadmap fit into how you feel people should respond in the next 90 days before an election?
Well, I think it makes people rightly uneasy because of what they think they can lose. I think it makes people rightly concerned because it's so obviously a well-planned setup for an authoritarian regime. I think it makes people morally uneasy because the ideological backdrop, which we haven't really talked about, is a very exclusivist kind of Christian nationalism, which has no place for people who don't have, from their point of view, the right kind of families and the right kind of views. I think the way it should motivate people is that they should realize that the thing this document is not about is freedom. It's about dysfunction. It's about letting things break. It's about putting pressure on people. It's about bullying people. It's not about freedom. The government can work to make us more free by making us feel more safe, by giving us a sense of the future, by looking after health, by looking after children. That's part of the American dream. And it's precisely that sense of a future which can be more free, which gets tossed out the window with a plan like this.
Professor, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you. Tim Snyder is a professor of history and global affairs at Yale University, author of the forthcoming book on freedom. And we're going to be sure to have you on the show talking about that whenever that comes out. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue more Velshi.